Welcome to the Solemn Vanguard channel. Today we are discussing what is the meta in Premium really. So the reason I really wanted to talk about this today is because there seem to be people who still believe that the Premium meta is just all Ichi-Kishima and Silent Tom, and I'm like, what? Do you even play? Like, Ichi-Tom hasn't done shit. Overall, that deck is just quite slow, so generally it doesn't do well. So with that out of the way, what is the meta? I look at it in 3 rows, let's say. Now I don't want to call it tiers, because it's really hard to call a deck tier 1 when it's accompanied by 5 other decks, and then tier 2 only having 4 and then all the rest being in 3. Like, it's a very awkward thing to do. Overall, right now, there are so many fucking decks that are either great or super viable and topping consistently that it's really like, what is the meta? In Yu-Gi-Oh! You usually have 1 or 2 or 3 decks, but here it's like easily 10 decks just all being really good and countering each other in some way. With that being said, I do think I have a pretty good grasp on what we should put higher than other stuff. So on the first row, let's say, we of course have OTT Gize. Now the interesting thing with OTT Gize is that it's not the best deck of the format. It is ridiculously easy to play and super annoying to play against, so I think it should be hit purely because it kind of is a gift to people who don't necessarily play well. And it also shuts down certain decks who could be good but just aren't because of its existence. That's why I think it should be hit. As far as topping goes, it's usually top tables or top 8, but it rarely actually wins an event because the other decks that I'm about to list are absolutely able to crush it. I do think it just topped, like got first place at one event last weekend, but that's it. So OTT Gize, very good deck, hits top tables and top 8, but then usually gets cucked by some other deck. Other deck being Ange. Ange is really good right now because it has infinite G guards. If you think it's only 8, only 8 is infinite. Yeah, it just, they have G guards until the end of the match. They have quite some strong swings and so forth. The deck has nothing in particular that it's insane at, but it's really great at almost everything. Then we have Spike Brothers. I would call it a tempo deck because essentially at every single point of the game, they are getting more value out of their cards than you are. The second they go grade 2, they have an insane rush. And if you let them hit at that point, they also get all their cards back from the grade 1 booster on hit thing, if they play that one. Then the second you are at a disadvantage already because of their rush, they go into either their grade 3 ride, which you don't want to let hit, and they just beat you with that extended rush, or they go into their stride, depending on who went first and so forth, and that stride is yet another really strong tempo play, aggression really early on. So overall they just scale really well and are able to work with very limited counterblast, which is then also handy against Gize. If they don't manage to kill you on their Aglias turns and their rush, they can then go into GB8 Hellheart 8, but that's really an alternative win con. There's some people who seem to believe that spikes are good because they use the heal triggers and the heal searching to turbo into GB8. That's no longer the case at all. Spikes just scale really well across the game. Grade 2, great rush, grade 3, great rush, Aglias, great stuff, and if they then didn't win, then they go Hellheart 8, but it's not a primary win condition. That's what makes them a good deck. Then we have Luard. Luard is interesting because if you miss your grade 3 ride, you are dead, but if you get it, you will likely win. So I dislike the deck because not hitting grade 3 is like insta brick, but if you do hit it consistently, you will just keep on winning games. The fact that you have a really strong early game with Blaster Dark, with your Fwamnax, maybe even your Blaster Javelin, you keep your draw going, so you go into your Dragfall Luard. And then you have your really strong Drag Abyss turns with restanding Dagda if you hit a stand and have a really new field that's all big swings and so forth. And they also have the utility to fetch anything from deck. And this is really important, they can get auto wins against Gize. And that is probably the key point here, because Luard is able to get to top tables, and then they meet Gizes, at which point they will likely start auto winning. Of course, things can go wrong. Gize can go Gize on grade 2 if they're really lucky and bullshit like that. But generally, Luard gets to push them to 4 damage and then they go Gize, okay, Diablo GG. That's what makes Luard good. In the early rounds, they will win against lesser decks or win off getting their Dragfall Luard. And then when they get to top tables and start facing Gizes, they just generally auto win. Apart from that, having constant access to Ultima also is something to keep in mind. Beyond that, they're one of the decks that uses Ultima and also has room for stand, so they can do both the stand and the crit thing, which is not something every deck is able to do. Apart from Luard, with AL4 coming in, of course we also get Dark Irregulars, the Assassin Loop. Everyone knows what this is by now, I believe. Basically, you get like 15, 16, even more attacks by using Enigmatic Assassin together with No Life King Death Anchor, and you just keep on swinging. The issue with that deck, again, is it's a bit bricky. If you get your combo off, yes, you win. There is no way your opponent beats you when you get your Assassin combo off. But getting it off is quite hard. Usually you do it after your first stride or after your opponent's first stride if you could G-guard, but sometimes you just don't get the pieces to soul charge or you don't see your enigmatics and then you sit there like, now what? So the deck is annoying, but it's also bricky, and if it's able to deal with Gize by playing Harpuya and Bobo, then it's suddenly even less consistent against everything that's not Gize. So that deck is definitely also on that top line, let's say. Finally, there's also Blasters. I don't know if I should be putting this in the top line or the second line, but it's just really solid. It's able to rush really well. It abuses force markers, I believe the best so far. Now, some people think that Tarna is what makes it broken. No, the best builds don't even fucking run Tarna. Like, Tarna is such an awkward card if you actually played the deck yourself before. Tarna is awkward because if you stride, you can't Tarna. You don't want to Tarna, at least. So Tarna only has use if you ride grade 3 first. So sure, the fantasy in your head is fun of going, I ride Alfred early, and then I do Tarna, 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 and suddenly I have 4 force markers in total, yeah! But that's not really realistic, because if you had that many Tarna in hands, did you have the grade 1 to ride? Did you have your Flogels? No? Did you have your Blaster Blade? Like, did you have all the pieces and all the Tarnas, and did you go first? Fuck no, it doesn't happen. So what usually happens, if you play your 4 Tarnas, is you just play the game regularly, you stride into Gancelot, and then you have a bunch of Tarnas in hand and you go, well, fuck me. So generally Tarna is like less than ideal in my opinion, and quite some topping lists seem to agree with me. Blasters is just good because it can rush really well, which is great against the Assassin Loop, great against Luard, great against Ange, great against Gize. And then, just like Spikes, they scale well into the later game because they get to do their force marker stuff with Alfred, put their blaster on there, Gancelot, lots of swings, put all the crits on Blaster Blade, new crit power, like the 10k instead of 5k makes that even better, and then your Floral Paladin Flogel start restanding it, and that's just really painful. It's not because of Tarna. Now getting to the second row, let's say, these are decks that you will still see top 8ing, like no problem, it's just that the ones above here top 8 quite a bit more. So here we have stuff like the Ripple deck we saw topping a few times. It's the Ripple deck like we used to know them, but then with Diamantes and an Excel Circle and a few more spicy decks. It's just really, really good at rushing. Then we have Machining Zoa. As you know, Antline with Zoa gives you an auto win, that's fun and all, but generally it's too slow to win against the better decks that I listed earlier. So it's solid, it can top, but once it gets to top 8, it will generally start losing against all these other better decks. In the same row, I would put Ichitom, same problem yet again. Yes, it's strong, yes, it beats quite some decks, yes, it can be annoying to play against, but overall, it starts losing against everything else I just listed. Now, I will say I like Mohamed's build quite a bit because he did some really interesting creative stuff right there. Then in that same row, I would probably put Grand Blue as well. Essentially, Grand Blue seeks to Megiddo you together with Skull Dragons, but it can also win on Galleon, and it can also just outscale you, let's say on Nitros, if you got a bit unlucky or they got a bit lucky. Overall, the deck is a really solid toolbox. It just loses really hard to Gize, and that's why it usually doesn't make top 8. And then on the third row, I would really start putting decks that are still good, but can't necessarily compete with Ange and so forth. Stuff like ZTB still made top 8 recently. Gredora made top 8 last weekend actually, because it deals very well with OTT Gize, but then doesn't really deal well with other cool stuff. Nubatama is still good against everything but Protect, but seeing as Protect is still a part of the tournaments, they then really struggle. If you know or don't know, they can rename it and call the Protect marker, and that just ruins their whole game plan, let's say. There's quite a few decks here that are just good, but then get outed by one deck that's in the top tables, and that's why they don't necessarily see the light of day. So that is essentially the premium meta right now. I think I listed 12 decks, something like that. Those are the decks you really want to be preparing for when going to a big premium event. I would say we will start seeing less Gizeh now because AL4 will be coming out, which means we will start seeing more Luard players who incorporate some AL4 cards like Charon or Nightmare Painter. And then we will also see more Assassin loops, which also cucks Gizeh. So we have two decks that are being strengthened or added into the format, which both have a good matchup against Gizeh. So I believe they will start seeing like a downtick. We'll see a bit more Luard, I believe. Overall, it's just really interesting. It's also really hard to deck build for. Like, when you have a 1 to 3 deck format, it's quite easy to innovate by going through your massive card pool and going, okay, maybe this card is going to be interesting to ruin this one deck. When there's 11 or 12 decks at the top of the meta, let's say, like, what are you going to prepare for? All the 12 decks? Are you going to tech 24 new cards in your deck? Good luck. Regardless, it does make your tournament experience really interesting because you face a large variety of decks. That is all for today. Hope you found this interesting. If you did, please subscribe to the Solemn Vanguard channel. Click the bell button to stay up to date. Like the video if you liked the video, and let me know your thoughts on the premium format right now in the comments down below. I will see you soon. Ciao.